Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cipher Brief. I am editor-writer Ethan Masupal. Today, we are talking about the top story of the week and likely for the foreseeable future, the Israel-Iran conflict. Here to talk with me about this is Ambassador Gary Grappo. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Oman and deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia. Ambassador Grappo, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you and to join the Cipher Brief again.
So, Ambassador, it's been a week now since Israel launched its first strikes on Iran, targeting its nuclear program, military targets. Uh, both sides continue to trade fire, but for now, the diplomatic option is still being worked. Today, European foreign ministers met with their Iranian counterpart. Early reports say that those talks were positive, but there was no breakthrough. I think we all expected that. But since it's been a week, Ambassador, I just wanted to do a level set where you think everyone stands and where things may go. So, starting with Iran, what is their position? They're demanding an end to Israeli attacks for more substantive talks, and they keep saying they won't agree to stopping uranium enrichment. But, and Iran has been battered in the past week, and honestly, for the past well over a year in many ways. So where do you see Iran's position right now, and what do you think the thinking is in Tehran?
Clearly, the mood must be very dismal, particularly among the leadership, both the political as well as the military security leadership organizations. As you have said, Ethan, the Iranians have been on their back foot for pretty much the past year, if not longer, but especially in the past year, when they launched the first attack against Israel back in April of last year, only exacerbated in October with the second round of attacks. And so they've lost their proxies on whom they had depended a great deal to protect the Iranian homeland, so to speak. And they really can't rely to any extent on any of those, maybe minimally on the Houthis in Yemen. But from a distance, we have seen that while the Houthis can certainly threaten Israel with missile attacks, they're usually easily repelled by the Israelis. The rest of the proxy lineup, certainly Hamas and Hezbollah, we've seen very, very little from them. In fact, nothing of note from them since the beginning of this latest round of hostilities between Israel and Iran. And so now Iran is in the one situation that they have been avoiding at every cost, and that is a threat to the Iranian homeland. And the Israelis have penetrated all of their defenses. They've taken down all of their air defense systems. They've taken out some top leadership, some really key positions in their leadership, both in the armed forces and in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, intelligence organizations. And they have proven, the Israelis have proven that they can attack virtually at will almost anywhere in Iran, including not only the various nuclear facilities, but military facilities and even political and economic structures throughout the country. This is a situation with which they have never had to deal in the last 40 years, if not longer. And so what options do they have? And their options are extremely limited. They certainly have their ballistic missiles, although they have proven not very effective against the Israelis, and that's without very much American interdiction of these missiles. That is, the Israelis, for the most part, have been able to repel ballistic missile attacks as well as the drone attacks. Now, they may be holding back. It's quite possible. I don't know the exact number that they may have. I'm certain it's more than we have seen so far, or at least an equal number. And the Israelis have to be aware of that. But for the most part, they understand that what they have to throw at Israel uh, really has a very effective deterrent shield in Israel, whereas the Iranians have none. And we have to bear in mind that almost all the Israeli attacks have been air attacks by aircraft. Not a single aircraft has been shot down, and this is after sortie after sortie after sortie of dozens of Israeli fighter aircraft, and they have not used any of their missiles so far that we know of. And so they are truly in a position where they are facing, I'm not going to say Armageddon, but their survival, particularly the survival of the regime, is
Mhm.
under threat. And that's going to should force them to reconsider what the Americans had put on the table when we were negotiating with them to try and avoid all of this.
Right. And you see that with, the Iranian foreign minister in Geneva today, them being open to talks. Um, I wanted to turn really quick to Israel. So, you know, even if talks with Iran between Europeans go forward, Israel's not showing any signs of backing down. In your assessment, do Israeli goals have a chance of being met by diplomacy?
By diplomacy, it's a tough question because we really don't know what's in the mind of Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. He has indicated that his most important key objective is the elimination of the nuclear threat from Iran. And then, secondly, a significant reduction in their longer range ballistic missiles. And then the third is a complete neutralization of the proxy network. I think they've already achieved, I'd say, 90 to 95% of that. We still have the Houthis out there to deal with, but for the most part, they're pretty far down the road in terms of objective number three, which is a lower priority. In terms of the nuclear, we all know that they don't have the capability of taking out the deeply buried facilities at Fordo. There may even be, I haven't seen the latest intelligence, of course, but there may even be deeply buried facilities in Natanz. But the Israelis have certainly done a pretty good job of taking out the surface and immediate subsurface areas at Natanz and even at facilities in Isfahan. They don't have the capability to take out, at least from a distance. That is either with ballistic missiles or aerial bombardment to take out Fordo and the deeply buried facilities there. However, uh, there has been posited the idea that they could send Israeli commandos on the ground to penetrate the whatever security the Iranians may have at Fordo and manually place explosives and destroy the deeply buried facilities at Fordo.
Mm.
That's a high risk, extremely high risk operation, fraught with all kinds of foreseeable and unforeseeable consequences for those commandos. But nevertheless, I think it's on the table. It really depends on whether President Trump authorizes the use of American weaponry, specifically the B 2 and the GBU 57 um, massive ordnance penetrator to take
Right.
out those facilities. On the
Right.
diplomatic side, Ethan, uh, it sounds like the Iranians are sending signals they want to negotiate, but without necessarily revealing their hand. What are they willing to compromise on? Now, it shouldn't be so surprising that they're not going to announce publicly, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z. This is something that they will do um, in face to face negotiations. However, I suspect that this will take a while to play out, and they're getting a somewhat introduction to that in meeting with the European foreign ministers.
Ambassador, I want to turn, due to your experience in the region, how do you think the Gulf states are looking at all of this? Of course, the risk of further escalation is the top concern for them.
Absolutely. And certainly, I would have to say that after the Iranians themselves and the Israelis, the most nervous folks are those in the Gulf region. They're worried about economic fallout of all of this, most certainly. But they're also worried that if, particularly the United States, enters into the conflict, that targets in their countries may be up for consideration by the Iranians, particularly in the oil infrastructure area. And so that's very much on their minds. And none of the Gulf countries want to see this happen and have every interest in seeing a negotiated solution to this. And that points out an opportunity that the administration has if it is serious about pushing a negotiated option, and that is to get all of the Gulf countries, but most especially, I would say, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and Qatar, to reach out at the highest levels, including head of state and certainly the foreign minister and even defense ministers, to their counterparts in Iran and urge them to come to the negotiating table with proposals that will end this conflict. And it will probably mean having to make some painful compromises with respect to enrichment.
Right.
So that's, I think, something that needs to be seriously considered by the administration, and I hope they are, because it's a potential to sort of bring in others into this to facilitate a negotiated solution if that's what the U.S. is interested in having.
Right. Right. Do you think the Gulf states have more leverage and credibility there than you think that the Europeans might have?
Yes, I think they do. All of them have reestablished better relations with Tehran. I wouldn't say they're great relations. They're not. There's still a lot of anxiety on the part of all of the Gulf countries about Iran and its intentions in the region. But Iran very much understands and appreciates the fact that if you could reach a negotiated solution and sanctions could be lifted, that Iran itself would benefit greatly from what is available to them in the Gulf and via the Gulf, the rest of the world. So there are mutual interests, and because all of them have worked very hard over the last several years at improving those relations, I think that's a possible opportunity, not an easy one, and certainly not a definitive one, but it's something that the administration ought to seriously explore and push.
Right. As you say, the U.S. position in all of this is using its leverage and influence on all of these different actors to push for a diplomatic deal if it wants it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Uh, so, given all of that, just to sum everything up, Ambassador, do you see a diplomatic off ramp here? It is very early, I know, but what are you looking for in the coming hours, days, and the next week on something that looks promising, and then also possible pitfalls?
First of all, I will say that there's another nation on whom we could call in order to apply pressure on Iran and to whom Iran would listen, and that's China.
Hmm.
Now, we don't have the best of relations with China these days, as we all know, given the effective tariff war that we have declared, and all the other differences that we have with China. Nevertheless, there are real interest on the part of China in avoiding a conflict that involves the United States. Now, there are also some advantages on the part of China if the U.S. enters into the conflict. The U.S. obviously gets tied down in another Middle East conflict with uncertain end. But nevertheless, avoiding a war in the Middle East ensures the reliability of oil coming from that part of the world to China, most specifically the Gulf and Iran. And it also tamps down the prospect of economic instability, global on a global scale, because obviously if war erupts, and it involves the United States in this part of the world, it'll have a tremendous impact on oil markets. In fact, we've already seen that. Oil markets are pretty resistant, and in general, economic markets have been pretty resistant to instability in the world, whether it's been COVID or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But when you get war in the Middle East, people stand up and pay attention. We've already seen a rise in oil prices at the very time when they were beginning to decline as OPEC producers started to raise their production levels. And therefore, this is something that China would probably want to avoid for its own economic self-interest, as well as the interest of all the markets around the world it serves. So I think reaching out to the Chinese, as difficult as it may be for this administration, and asking them to use their good offices with Tehran could possibly pay some benefits here.
It's an interesting call to action. As some experts have said that China does not have the most influence or credibility in the region, but its ties with Iran can't be forgotten.
Oh yeah, and I think its ties in the region in general are certainly not as strong as those that the United States has. But on the other hand, they have particularly good ties on a relative scale with Iran. Iran deems China a political ally, not a military ally, but a political ally. And that's important to keep in mind. And therefore, I believe that the Iranians would listen to the Chinese, not necessarily follow their advice, will definitely listen. So I would hope then that the administration would consider reaching out to Beijing and seeking their assistance in this, if, again, as you mentioned, they're truly interested in a diplomatic outcome to this conflict.
Right. It's a dynamic situation. It's literally changing every single minute. By tomorrow, perhaps everything we have discussed here will be a little bit out of date. But Ambassador Grappo, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure, Ethan. Good to talk to you.